The studio lights burned bright enough to make the air itself look tense, a shimmering haze rising over the stage floor as Mark Harmon stepped onto the set of the Kelly Clarkson show. The audience erupted with applause, warm, enthusiastic, the kind of welcome only a long-beloved actor could draw. Mark flashed a polite smile, nodding once to acknowledge the cheers. But beneath that calm, classic exterior, there was the faintest stiffness in his shoulders, a coiled energy that only those who knew him well would have noticed. Something about this interview had already rubbed him the wrong way, and it hadn't even started. Kelly Clarkson greeted him with her usual spark, bouncing slightly on her feet as she extended her arms in welcome. "Everybody, give it up again for Mark Harmon," she said, beaming, as the applause swelled. She wrapped him in a quick hug, and Mark responded with practiced warmth. Cameras zoomed in, producers leaned forward behind the glass of the control booth. It was just another afternoon show, at least, that's how it was supposed to be. They sat opposite each other in the plush chairs, the stage designed to look cozy, like a bright living room with soft blues, creams, and golds. Kelly crossed one leg over the other, holding her stack of cue cards. Mark folded his hands in his lap, that familiar quiet confidence radiating off him, the same presence that made millions of viewers trust him as Leroy Jethro Gibbs for nearly 2 decades. "So, Mark," Kelly began, flashing a friendly grin. "You've been keeping busy after leaving NCIS. A little directing, some producing, some very mysterious projects you won't tell anybody about." The audience chuckled. Mark gave a small smile, nodding. "I've always liked staying busy." Kelly laughed. "I heard that about you." She glanced down at her cards. "But I also heard you weren't super thrilled about a certain question I asked a while back. Something about creative conflicts on set." The audience murmured, sensing a shift. Mark's smile tightened. He leaned back slightly, as though giving himself room. Kelly forged ahead, breezy and unbothered. "You know, the internet blew up about it. People thought maybe you walked away from NCIS because of drama with the cast. I just gotta ask, was there something going on behind the scenes we should know about?" A subtle tension rippled through the studio. Mark's jaw ticked. He looked at Kelly quietly for a long moment, long enough that even she felt the energy in the room shift. The audience stopped murmuring and went completely silent. "I didn't leave because of drama," Mark said finally, his voice even but firm. "I've said this before." His tone was gentle, but there was a steel edge underneath it. "I left because it was time." Kelly nodded, but she wasn't ready to let it slide. She laughed, trying to keep the energy light. Right, totally. But, you know, people always say that. Oh, it was just time. But you were the heart of the show for 19 years. Fans don't really buy that there wasn't something more." Mark gave her a steady look, and the warmth in his expression dimmed just a little more. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting lightly on his knees. "Kelly," he said softly, "I don't owe the internet explanations about my personal or professional decisions." A few audience members made low, ooh, sounds. Kelly blinked, thrown for the first time. "Well, I mean," she said, laughing nervously, "this is a talk show. We talk. That's kind of the deal." Mark didn't smile this time. "There's talking," he said, "and then there's digging. You're digging into something that doesn't involve you, or your viewers." Kelly straightened, caught off guard. "Whoa, okay," she said, trying to recover. "I didn't mean to pry. Fans just want to know what happened. I'm just giving them what they want." Mark's eyes stayed locked on hers, sharp, unblinking. "But at some point," he said, "you should ask yourself whether what fans want is the same as what is respectful." The tension thickened like smoke. The audience shifted, glancing at one another, unsure if they were watching a real confrontation or an unusually intense bit for daytime TV. Kelly took a deep breath, raising her hands slightly in surrender. "All right, fair enough. We'll switch topics." She flipped her cards quickly, cheeks slightly flushed. "Let's talk about your new project." But she barely had time to glance at the next card before Mark leaned back again and said, "Before we move on, I want to say something." Kelly froze, forcing a smile. "Sure." Mark spoke calmly, but his voice carried weight. "I agreed to do this interview to talk about my work. Not rumors, not gossip, not whatever tabloids write to get clicks." His gaze didn't waver. "I'm a private person. I've always been a private person. And I thought that would be respected here." Kelly swallowed. A camera operator instinctively zoomed in on Mark's face, another caught Kelly's forced smile. Every producer in the control room leaned forward at once, exchanging frantic glances. This was not the uplifting afternoon banter they'd scheduled. This was something else, something raw, unpredictable, and rapidly slipping out of their control. Kelly tried to shift the energy back. I do respect you, Mark. Truly. I think you're amazing. I think your work is amazing. Sometimes the audience likes a little spice, you know. Mark gave the smallest shake of his head. I'm not here for spice. There was no anger in his voice, but the conviction in it was unmistakable. He wasn't joking. He wasn't playing along. He was drawing a line. The audience sensed it immediately. Some leaned forward, some sank back, everyone held their breath. Kelly tapped her cue cards against her knee, trying to decide whether to double down or back away. The hesitation was visible, painfully visible. The studio lights magnified every slight twitch. Then Mark added, if you want to talk about the project, we can do that. But if you want drama, you invited the wrong person. A ripple of murmurs swept through the audience. Kelly's smile faltered again. Okay, she said finally, her voice a little thinner. Let's talk about the project. Backstage after the awkward break, the atmosphere was nothing like the polished calm the audience saw. The moment the cameras cut to commercial, Kelly Clarkson inhaled sharply, muttering something under her breath as she stood from her chair. Her smile faded the instant she turned her back to the crowd. A producer rushed to her side, whispering urgently, while Mark Harmon remained seated, posture composed, hands folded, a statue carved from patience and quiet resolve. He had not raised his voice. He had not insulted her. But his calm, pointed refusal to play along with the show's more gossipy undertone had rattled everyone, including Kelly herself. And as the seconds ticked down to the return from commercial, that tension only grew thicker. The stage manager's countdown echoed across the studio, back in 5, 4. Kelly inhaled deeply, lifting her shoulders, forcing a smile into place. Mark remained still, looking toward the band, then toward the audience. He seemed unbothered, but there was a heaviness in his expression now, like someone who had come hoping for an easy conversation and instead found himself stepping through a minefield. 3, 2, 1. The cameras snapped back on. The cheerful theme music faded. Kelly's smile bloomed again, ready-made for millions of viewers. But the strain beneath it was visible. She shifted, in her seat, turning back to Mark with a tight-lipped expression that suggested unfinished business. So, she said, exhaling a quick laugh, before we went to break, we got a little heated. The audience tittered uncomfortably. Mark turned his head slowly toward her, brows lifting slightly, an unspoken if you say so in his expression. Kelly pressed on, her tone overly bright. I just want to clear something up so everyone understands, this is a safe space for open conversation. And I think my questions were fair. The audience murmured again. Something in the air crackled. Mark's gaze sharpened. He didn't move his body, but his presence shifted, subtle, but powerful. A fair question, he said quietly, doesn't come with assumptions baked into it. Kelly blinked, taken aback. I wasn't assuming anything. You were, Mark answered simply. You assumed what people online speculated must be true. You assumed I owed you an explanation. Kelly opened her mouth to argue, but Mark's voice deepened, not with anger but with finality. And you assumed it was your place to press something I've already said I won't discuss. A hush fell over the crowd. The live audience felt it first, the unmistakable sensation that someone was saying what they meant, without fear of blowback, without fear of the cameras, without fear of the format. It was raw, unfiltered honesty. Kelly squared her shoulders. Mark, this is my show. I ask the questions. People expect me to. Mark nodded. And I give the answers I choose to. She paused, thrown again. Well, sure, but you made it sound like I was trying to exploit something. Mark didn't look away. You were. The audience collectively gasped. Not dramatically, not like a sitcom cue, this was real. Electric. Unscripted. Kelly's eyes widened. That's not fair, she shot back. I was just doing my job. Your job, Mark said with a calm that only made the moment sharper, is to talk to people. Not push them into corners they've already stepped away from. He tilted his head. Or am I wrong? Kelly's lips parted, but no words came out. Her cheeks flushed a deeper pink. Even the band members glanced at one another, unsure whether to play a light riff or keep still. One of the producers in the control room mouthed, cut to break, but the director shook his head. This, whatever this was, had become the most gripping moment the show had stumbled into in months. Kelly cleared her throat, trying again. Look, Mark, I wasn't trying to push you into anything. Really, fans have been curious. And fans can be curious, he said gently. That doesn't mean I'm required to satisfy that curiosity. Kelly exhaled sharply,